In today's video, we're going to be doing immigration inside of Canada, part 4. So here is the map, the flag of Canada, so that's how it looks like. This is the map of Canada, and this is the current Prime Minister of Canada, and his name is Justin Trudeau. So let's just see what we're going to be covering inside of this part 4 video today. So in this part 4 video, we're going to be learning about, so the first thing we're going to look at is the PNP, or otherwise known as the Provincial Nomination Program. The second thing we're going to look at is the highlight of immigration inside of Canada, the Chinese head tax, and finally fourth, we're going to look at the Singh Decision. And we're also going to be looking at some more things about refugees, and we're going to look at those later on in this video. So this is just going to be the main 4 things that we're going to cover in this video, and let's just see what we did in our recap for our part 1, 2, and 3 videos. So for our recap, first of all, what we looked at was Canada's geography. So this was in our part 1 video. So we first looked at Canada's geography. Second, we looked at the land of immigration and why Canada is called the land of immigration. And also in part 1, we also looked at why immigration is important inside of Canada. In our part 2 video, we talked about the IRPA Act, or otherwise known as Immigration and Refugees Protection Act. And we also talked a lot about the economic class and the economic immigrants. And finally, in our part 3 video, we talked about the economic class, and also we talked about refugees, policies, and laws as well. So let's get started with the PNP, or otherwise known as the Provincial Nomination Program. So here is the map of Canada. So we have all of our territories here and all of our provinces. And basically, the Provincial Nomination Program allows provinces to nominate a percentage of the immigrants that Canada selects. Provinces can ask for immigrants who have particular skills, but cannot require an immigrant to move to a certain city. And also, provinces can speed up your immigration process if you have the skills the province is looking for, and even ignore portions of the point system. So the point system, if you don't know already about this, we covered this in our part 3 video, so make sure to check that video out. And basically, a recap of what the PNP is basically it allows provinces to nominate the percentage of immigrants that Canada selects each year. And basically, the immigrants that they select have to stay in their certain city until they're able to move on to another city or province. So that's basically what the PNP is. So it allows the provinces to nominate the percentage of immigrants that Canada selects each year. So now let's look at the highlights of the economic class. So let's look back into 2017. So in 2017, 56% of permanent residents of emissions were from the economic class. In 2017, 39% of the economic immigrants were settled outside of these 3 cities, which are Montreal, Toronto, or Vancouver. And also in between 2016 and 2017, international students and visitors contributed to over $31 billion to the Canadian economy. So what we're talking about here is the highlights of the economic class. And basically, in 2017, 56% of the permanent residents were from the economic class. So we can see that most of them are from the economic class. And if you don't know what the economic class is, we already talked about that in our previous video, so make sure to check that video out as well. And basically, so we can see that a major portion of them is from the economic class. And the economic class, 39% of them settled outside of the 3 cities, which is Montreal, Toronto, and Vancouver. These are the 3 most popular cities inside of Canada with the most population. And also in between 2016 and 17, the international students and visitors contributed to $31 billion for the Canadian economy. So this is just the highlights of the economic class and what they did over the past 2 years. And now let's cover over the Chinese head tax. So in the past, Canada favored immigrants of British ancestry and restricted immigration from Asian countries such as China and India. For example, between 1885 and 1923, Canada discouraged immigration from China by requiring every Chinese immigrant to pay a fixed fee known as head tax. So basically, the Chinese head tax in the past, since Canada favored immigrants of British ancestry and they did not like immigrants from China and India, between these dates, so 1885 and 1923, they put a fixed fee for every Chinese immigrant, and that's what we call Chinese head tax. So that was just something to discourage immigration from China and keep them away from Canada. So that's what the Canadian government did back then. And furthermore, the Chinese head tax, between 1923 and 1946, all Chinese immigrants were even banned from entering Canada entirely. So between these dates, Canada fully banned immigrants from China entering inside of Canada. Now, no one is excluded from Canada because of their race or country of origin. For example, the point system evaluates people based on their skills and education. So we can see before, the Canada did not accept most immigrants from Asian countries, but nowadays, Canada includes anybody, doesn't really matter where they're from or their race. All they do is based on their skills and education, and we can see that comes from the point system because the point system determines how good their skills are and how good their education is. Now let's cover over the Singh Decision. So Satnam Singh came to Canada from India seeking a refugee status. And under the Immigration Act 1976, Satnam Singh's request for refugee status was rejected by the Canadian government. This act did not allow Mr. Singh to state his case in person or to appeal the government's decision. Section 7 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms states that everyone has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person and the right to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. So this section of the Charter, Section 7, it just states that everyone should be allowed to have their own rights to life, and they should also be allowed to do whatever they please. And furthermore, the Supreme Court said that everyone, included every person physically presented in Canada, this decision drastically changed the way of refugees were dealt inside of Canada. So what happened was after the Section of 7 in the Charter, so as a result of the Section 7 of the Charter, everyone claiming refugee status had the right to an in-person hearing. While waiting for the hearing, Canada's government provides them with the essentials of life. So basically what the Singh Decision did was that Satnam first came over to Canada and he was refused, and after that the Supreme Court noticed that the section of the Charter was there, and it states that everyone has the right to do anything inside of Canada, and as a result of that, everyone claiming for the refugee status also has the right to an in-person hearing. So if they disagree with what the court is telling them, the government is telling them, then they have the right to the in-person hearing. Okay, so now let's look over the immigration and what happened to the Indigenous people because of the immigration. So this is a chart, so let's just quickly explain this chart first before we look more in depth about this. So here we have the non-Aboriginal people and the Aboriginal people. So first of all, what are the Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal? So the Canadian Constitution recognizes three groups of Aboriginal people: Indians, but nowadays we don't call them Indians, we call them as the First Nations. Second group we have is the Inuit, and the third group we have is the Métis. So these are basically, you can see the three main Aboriginal people group. And here we can see the Aboriginal people group consists of the first people we had inside of Canada, and non-Aboriginals are just the new immigrants that came outside of Canada, like nowadays. And here in this chart, we can see that the blue one is Aboriginal people, and the green one represents the non-Aboriginal. And we can see that the employment rate is way higher for the non-Aboriginal people, so the immigrants that are non-Aboriginal. And we can see that they're way higher than what the Aboriginal people are getting. And Indigenous people and Canada's government are committed to work together and share prosperity through treaties and agreements. And some Indigenous people still face health, education, and employment challenges linked to poverty and the impact of past policies and laws. So this was a big problem with Indigenous people because they were saying, why is Canada bringing in so much immigration if they're not able to live properly yet? So we're going to look more about this right now. So this was when the UN resolution to number 49, this is when the UN took place and started talking to Canada about their immigration regarding to the Indigenous people. So this perspective of the resolution 49, which happened inside of 2005, is that Canada said, well, the UN said that Canada is a wealthy country, but they ignored the needs of the First Nation people, which were the first people that were inside of Canada. And the Assembly of the First Nations called on the federal government to freeze all immigration coming into Canada until the federal government addresses issues facing the Indigenous peoples. And that includes improving housing conditions, education, health, and employment in First Nation communities. So basically what happened was in Resolution 49, the UN said that Canada was a very wealthy country and is allowing so much immigrants in, but they said that they're ignoring all the needs that the First Nation people had. And they could see this because you could see all the First Nation people on the road, living homelessly, while all the immigration people, so all the immigrants, they're working really successfully and making the economy good. So what the UN was telling Canada was to freeze all immigration until they could address all the issues that the First Nations or Indigenous peoples had. And that was including all of this, so improving the housing conditions, the education, health, employment, and etc. So that was the UN resolution number 49. And now let's talk about immigration and Francophone Albertan communities. So Alberta has the desire to attract French-speaking immigrants to support minority language communities. And here is a map of Alberta. So the map of Canada, this is Alberta, the province. And there are centers in Edmonton and Calgary to welcome and help settle Francophone immigrants. So this is the Francophone immigrants inside of Alberta. Now let's talk about the Canada Quebec Accord. So Quebec is the biggest, it's the province right here. You can see right there. And the Canada Quebec Accord is a specific agreement that the Canadian government has with Quebec. And this accord allows Quebec to demand that immigrants who want to settle in Quebec has to go to a French language school. And about 75% of French-speaking immigrants settle in Quebec still, and more non-French-speaking immigrants settle in Quebec than French-speaking immigrants. So before this, Canada and Quebec wanted to become its own country and separate from Canada. So what Canada did was create the Quebec Accord so that they had specific agreements with Quebec, the Canadian government. And that's also basically for this video. So thank you so much for watching this part 4 video of the series, and make sure to watch our other 3 parts. And so yeah, that's all for this video and for the series. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys next time.